Hello everyone, this is Neronium. Welcome back to Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory. Last time we started up the Birth by Sleep worlds, and in this part we're going to be continuing with most of the songs in Birth by Sleep up until really the finale of Birth by Sleep. And it's funny because once we end up beating this path, we're pretty much going to unlock the rest of the game. It's hilarious. I could ignore Dream Drop Distance if I wanted to, but that would deprive you of the pain that is the Dream Drop Distance songs. Oh, I'll talk about those in due time. Now, interestingly enough, I find the animations for Maleficent's minions are easier to track than the unversed. And you're gonna see that. It's weird to me. Also, I love the Silent Forest. It's such a good track. And that's really, I guess, something I could have brought up in the last part. Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep was the first Kingdom Hearts song that uses a full orchestral track without needing to do MIDI tracks for it. Because the PSP was the first console and handheld, for that matter, that did not have to have sound processed through a synthesizer chip, through a MIDI chip, which is interesting. And as a result, Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, Rechain of Memories, and obviously we also have 358 over 2 days, and Recoded for that matter later on, all use bit crunched or MIDI tracks because obviously the devices can't stream full music the way that they're supposed to. PSP was a beast of a handheld, and a lot of people think that the PSP failed. No, it didn't fail. It just didn't sell as much as the Nintendo DS, which nothing ever again sold that much until the Nintendo Switch. The DS, it was basically the reverse for Nintendo of what happened with the Nintendo GameCube and the PS2. By all accounts, yes, the GameCube undersold tremendously. But look at the competition it was against. It was against the PlayStation 2. The first real affordable DVD player for many people, and a system that was backwards compatible with the PlayStation 1 near fully. Yeah, a lot of people think that the PS2 could play all PS1 games. No, there's a few PS1 games that the PS2 does not like. Just like how on the PS3, there's a few PS2 games on backwards compatible PS2s that the PS3 does not like. One of them is, I think, Area 51 for some strange reason. Alright, so this one we gotta do on Proud Mode. And this one I actually think I do first try. I love how I haven't been talking about the loading screens for the little characters. Just the different reactions they have. Some of them were just absolutely hilarious. It's like, man. Like that last one. What did Ventus see that has him so shocked? Is it the fact that they have to fight an army of pig soldiers? Probably that. But yeah, onto the console front, a lot of consoles, the competition was just tough, especially during the 6th and 7th generations. 7th generation especially because there was the force that was the Nintendo Wii, which was, for the longest time, Nintendo's best-selling home console. And it wouldn't be until the Switch that we really get numbers like that again. And even then, the Wii was close to, not close to overtaking the PS2, but it still sold a hefty amount. But a lot of outside factors kind of limited it, and not to mention the retention rate of the Nintendo Wii is always something that you have to take into mind, because yeah, the Wii sold a lot, but a lot of people didn't really always play it. Especially because at the time, Sony and Microsoft were doing the HD consoles, which that was the next big thing. But I don't think in terms of console generations, we will ever see I guess, leap like we did from the PlayStation 1 to the PlayStation 2. I still think the leap from the biggest leaps we ever had in video games were the 4th generation to the 5th and the 5th generation to the 6th. That was when we saw the most technological leap that I don't think we're ever going to see again in video game consoles. Or really in video games in general, because that was a really big make or break time. Oh boy, here comes the copyright. Because you have the 4th generation, which was 16-bit graphics, and some early 3D games like Star Fox and a couple others with the Super FX chip and the Mode 3 chips and everything. To the 5th generation, which was the first generation with full 3D graphics. But even then, the adoption towards 3D was very slow. But then you've got the PlayStation 2 generation of the 6th generation. That was where a lot of things, like, just graphically improved so much that you could not ignore it. Because let's say you go from Final Fantasy IX, to bring up Final Fantasy IX again. Final Fantasy IX was released in the year 2000. Final Fantasy X was released a year later. The graphical change between Final Fantasy IX and X was astounding. Not to mention, it was the first Final Fantasy with full voice acting. Because even during the 5th generation, voice acting was never fully embraced. Sure, it was on some Sony systems, but it wasn't like something that every game did. And just, I guess it's really that sense of wonderment of like, oh wow, this game looks so good. To which I never understood the insult nowadays that people throw around, like, this looks like a PS2 game. You're kind of showing your age there, because PS2 games, even to this day, and I will always defend the PS2 for this, PS2 games look amazing. Even to this day, it puts, if an art style is good enough, it can put modern games to shame. Case in point, Wind Waker HD compared to the original Wind Waker. I think original Wind Waker with the cell shading looks a lot more robust. And if it had a widescreen support mode and a resolution higher than 480p, it would look fine on modern televisions. And a lot of PS2 games, it's the same way. Like, just update the textures, boom, you've got the better looking games. Like, PS2 games do not look bad. What a lot of people are equating to being, yeah, no, this game looks like a PS2 game. No, you're just equating the resolution to it looking bad, not the game's art direction. And at the same time, realistic looking games will always age like milk. Always. Which is why I'm very disappointed with Sony nowadays, because they chase the photorealism too much. And also the games that are like, oh, super serious for adults only, or for like more mature gamers. Like, no, you need a balance. Because that's something that the PS2 is also the last generation to really have. For, at least for Sony and especially for Microsoft, the, like, balance between, yeah, this is a silly game for all ages and a game that is for mature audiences. And it's why, like, I honestly regret buying a PlayStation 5 technically twice. I had bought the PlayStation 5 originally for Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. That was always going to be the case. I finished Rift Apart. There was no games on the horizon that really interested me. But then I realized, like, I should probably get just another PlayStation 5 just to at least play PlayStation 4 games. Even nowadays, a lot of the games I play are available on both consoles. And Sony used to never be like that for me. I used to gravitate towards one console and then switch to the other console later on in the generation, unless I started with the console that I was more interested in. This happened during the 7th generation with the PlayStation 3 becoming my more played system than the PlayStation, than the Xbox 360. And then in the 8th generation with the Xbox One X actually starting to become more played than my PlayStation 4. But then, with this new 9th generation, I started with the Xbox Series X. Technically, I started with the Switch, but Nintendo doesn't really follow generational conventions for when they release their consoles. And then I got a PlayStation 5. I can't even say I'm playing the PlayStation 5 more than the Xbox Series X. Because really in case of both consoles, I'm playing the previous generation of games or older in the case of the Xbox Series X than I am the modern games. And that's more of a problem with modern gaming in general that I have, is that they try to appeal only to the mature audience and then leave the, like, all age games for Nintendo, which is like, Nintendo's always going to make games for all ages, but they've also been dabbling more into more mature games too, especially on the Nintendo Switch. They kind of started it more with the Wii U, but that's, let's be honest, not many people bought the Wii U, unfortunately. But it led to the rampant success of the Switch, because Nintendo went full hands on deck for the Switch, so there is that. But that's just how it really is. And, I mean, with AAA games especially, I've never been one to really go after AAA games too much because they kind of bore me. Especially in the terms of AAA games, the lack of just how the budgets have ballooned and so many studios have gone under because of that ballooning cost. And not that didn't happen in previous gens. The PS2 killed a lot of game studios because of just how difficult it was to develop for. And that's one thing to keep in mind. We're going to do another one of those ones where we play on a lower difficulty. Because we are gonna... So here's me looking at the items, and I'm like, okay, we'll just get double XP. The problem with a lot of the video game industry nowadays is they're moving towards, and this has been a move that's been decades in the making, of the, you don't own the game, you own the license to play the game. Which is why the all-digital future is a terrible thing, and why it's still going to end up happening, even though people are still going to want to buy physical. as online improves, a lot of companies are going to start trying to force that more, which is what Microsoft really shot themselves in the foot with their cloud gaming. It works now, but it would not have worked in 2012 when the Xbox One first launched because of the fact that the infrastructure for internet in a lot of countries, the United States especially, is very bad. It's very antiquated. Like, it does not really work. A lot of places are still on DSL, barely some on broadband. My area for my internet connection barely got what was it called? We barely got fiber optics a couple of months ago. Before that, we only had 2 options. That was Cox Communications or AT&T. And in reality, you only had one option because AT&T's wires for internet down where I live is limited to 25 megabits per second. Cox had their Gigablast, which was throttled fiber optic. Not even fiber optic, throttled DSL and all that. And that's why I was like, what in the world? Why would Microsoft try to do what they did? And I think that's what's hurt their business the most, is people still hold on to when the Xbox One launched. Because the Series X is a good console. The digital Series S is a good budget console, but the all-digital thing is a deal breaker for me. And then they made an all-digital Xbox Series X, which again just shows that no matter what, as much as we hem and haw, they're still going to try and push the digital future because they want to have it that you don't own the games. You physically don't own the games. They want to have it that you own a software license, which is just more of a into that prevailing theory of everything will get worse, but you will still enjoy it. And it's easy to become, when you've grown up with gaming, like a lot of us have, seeing this. I mean, even back then, it was like Nintendo under Hiroshi Yamauchi was very strict for like controlling everything. But they didn't have the technology to really do what they can do nowadays. They had some hints at it, some television and all that, for example. But as technology advances, consumer rights kind of become more of a topical thing. And this isn't just like related to video games either. This is a big thing with operating systems now, especially with Windows 11. Because here you have, for example, like Mac OS. That's always been closed source. But you had Windows, which used to be more open. You could mess with the registry, you could do with a lot of things. With what Microsoft's trying to do with the whole terms of services updates and everything is basically make it that you don't own the operating system that you bought. And trust me, operating systems are expensive. So it's all just related. It all interconnects into each other, with companies just wanting to have more control over everything in your life. A big example of that is Adobe. I'm so glad I never really used Adobe software. I did at one point try to get the Adobe Suite, but I got charged a cancellation fee of $40 when I tried to cancel it, which was annoying because at the time I couldn't afford it. I could barely afford the whole subscription service thing. And a lot of like editing software is moving towards that sort of subscription-based system, and I don't like that. I really don't like that. I don't even care about like they're taking my personal data. At this point, with how everything is, right to privacy is long gone, and that's probably never coming back. So it's not even just like selling user data, because at this point I'm jaded and cynical enough to know like no matter what, my data is going to be sold. It's more so just like let me do what I want to do with the software I bought, or let me buy the software and not have to pay a subscription. It's why also in games, you'll notice this with me, I've never played a subscription-based game. I don't like subscriptions in games, which is why I never play MMOs, because I don't like the idea of having to pay a subscription to access something that I've already paid money for. And in sometimes, the subscriptions are ridiculously expensive. The other reason is because I tend to have an addictive personality, and I know I fall into the rabbit hole of subscription-based games easily. It's also why I don't play gacha games for the most part. I think the only gacha game I've ever actually played was Fallout Shelter on my own time. And I actually got lucky on pulls back then and maxed out everything, but then when I changed phones, my save file went bye-bye, so I'm like, okay, I'm done with this game. I don't want to start it over, even though it is on the Nintendo Switch. I tried downloading it on that, but I couldn't, like, obviously get the save file back because different save architectures. But point is, I'm just not a fan of subscriptions. And with Adobe especially, they're starting to get their comeuppance now. So it'll be interesting going forward to see what Adobe does, because there are a lot of alternatives. For example, for my thumbnails, I use the open source software paint.net. I've been using that since 2015, I think, because I only before that I used regular Paint because I wanted to use Adobe, but one, it's horribly optimized nowadays. Two, the subscription service sucks. And three, just Adobe in general are just really scummy, so I just never did that. Basically, to cap this all off, as we see Stitch do his little waddle, which is hilarious to me, subscriptions are becoming more prevalent because they're allowed to get through with them. They try their best to take away what we already have, which I realize sounds kind of pretentious, but it just thoughts really on that. It's one of those things where I just have never liked subscriptions, and I'm grateful that Blackmagic, the makers of DaVinci Resolve, still allow you to buy their software without doing a subscription. I think they have a beta subscription going on. But then at the same time, Vegas also started doing a subscription service, but they still let you buy the software, which I like. I like the ability to buy the software so then I don't have to pay a subscription every month. Plus also, ever since I bought DaVinci Resolve, I bought DaVinci Resolve at DaVinci Resolve 17. I was used to, at the time, okay, that'll only ever get me DaVinci Resolve 17. DaVinci Resolve has allowed me to upgrade all the way to my current one that I use, which is DaVinci Resolve 19, for free. I have never needed to pay for another license key, of which there's only 2 license keys that you can use with DaVinci when you get it. But I like that. And the fact that DaVinci Resolve is so intuitive and also has like the ability for you to, if you're moving from say Magix Vegas or Adobe Premiere, you can actually set your keys to mimic those ones for shortcuts. That's intuitive. But I've rambled on enough. Waddle away, Stitch. Waddle away. But anyway, everyone, I'm going to end it off right here. This has been Neronium. Next time, we'll be finishing up the Birth by Sleep worlds and doing a little bit of Dream Drop Distance as we get closer to the end of Melody of Memory. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to check out more Kingdom Hearts content, check out the top link for a playthrough of Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind, done on the PlayStation 5. And for another rhythm-based game, check out the bottom link for a playthrough of The Nightmare Before Christmas, Oogie's Revenge, done on the PlayStation 2.